Okay. I'm Bree Bro.
And I'm Lakey Shupak.
And we're Team All on the Line North Carolina. And we are going to talk today just about the redistricting hearings that happened over the last month. And we were in attendance. One of us was at every single hearing. And we just wanted to share out some of the top lines of what we heard at these hearings, you know, in case folks watching this don't want to watch 20 hours of redistricting hearings. We thought we could just share some top lines.
Yeah, we did so you don't have to.
We did it so you don't have to. That's kind of our whole job with that. Okay, great. Well, so first of all, can we talk first a little bit about, you know, how we got here and what was the process of these hearings, you know, where they were and how that was decided?
Yeah, so basically, at the beginning of this redistricting process, when the redistricting committees first started meeting, we were told that there would be a debate and that a public hearing schedule would be voted on by the end of August. We had an initial committee meeting where the chairs of the committee proposed 11 hearing sites. And so there was a little bit of debate then. A lot of other members were saying that that wasn't enough sites. Were saying that certain places needed a site that didn't have one. And we were told that we would have another committee meeting, there would be a vote on the sites.
A lot of people wrote in and emailed asking for more sites.
And that's not what happened. There was no vote on the sites. Basically what happened was at after 5 p.m., I think it was the last Thursday in August, something like that.
Or before a holiday weekend, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Basically, a hearing schedule was posted surreptitiously on the legislative website.
Yeah. The Democrats on the committee found out about it on Twitter, I believe.
I wouldn't be surprised. That seems the way our legislative leadership does stuff. But yeah, it was basically dropped after 5 p.m. I wouldn't have found out about it except for I think it was Sailor Jones from SDSJ on Twitter was trolling the website trying to see if something random happened. And that's how we found out what those sites were going to be. And yeah, so I mean,
they added 2.
Yeah, really, yeah, they added 2, so it was 13. Really, I think indicative of what we've come to expect, though, from them in this process.
Yeah. And so when we got that list, we heard from a lot of speakers, you know, about sort of the accessibility of those hearings, both the locations and also, you know, the time and other things. What was some of the feedback that we heard in the hearings themselves from speakers about how accessible these hearings were?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, we can talk about the locations. So, for instance, in the West, the one hearing that was out West was in Cullowhee. Gorgeous. It was at Western North Carolina. And that is about an hour from Asheville. And we all know that Asheville is the biggest city in that area. Asheville did not get its own hearing. People from Asheville would have had to drive an hour out to Cullowhee to go to this hearing and to actually be able to get a chance to testify in person. And that was really sort of the thing that we saw over and over again. So in the Triad, there was a hearing. It was in Winston-Salem. Greensboro is our 3rd largest city. I'm glad there was a hearing in Winston-Salem. Greensboro probably deserved its own. By population, Wake County is now our largest county. There was no hearing in Wake County. People would have had to go to Durham for that hearing. Like you said, at 5 p.m. Yeah, I don't know if any of you have ever been on 40 at 5 p.m.
If you've got to drive from Raleigh to Durham, to be in Durham at 6, it's not fun.
Yeah, no, it's not great. And so just locations-wise, you know, there were a lot of places that I think got locations that it was really great in a way. You know, like Caldwell County. I don't think, you know, in the past we may have had a hearing out there, and so I think that was good. But intentionally skipping over a lot of these really large areas, I mean,
particularly places with a history of, you know, gerrymandering.
Yeah, I mean,
you knew people were going to have
exactly. Yeah, I mean, Greensboro has been a target of gerrymandering for forever. Asheville has also been targeted for gerrymandering. These places did not get their own hearings, so that was a big issue.
And then other, so time of day, locations, what else were some issues that?
Yeah. So like you were saying, also a lot of these were held at 3, 4 p.m. That is not that is a time when most people are working.
Right.
So it's really, really hard to access.
Definitely heard from people who had, single moms, multiple single moms. I definitely remember one woman in Robeson mentioned that, she had to get her kids from school, had to scramble to get childcare and get to the hearing by 3, and teachers who would have wanted to testify, no way they could get to the hearings that were that early in the day.
Yeah. So there's sort of inaccessibility in the time of day, but also. We had some last-minute venue changes. I know when I went out to Caldwell County, they said it was at the local community college. I showed up to the local community college. There was like a random little sheet of paper stuck up somewhere saying, "Oh, actually, it's like 10 minutes down the road." And so having to go do that, and that happened a couple times.
Yeah, the one in Forsyth, the location with the building was correct, but within the building it was wrong. And I said to someone, we need to put a note on the door.
And I also heard that at Pembroke. It wasn't actually Pembroke.
It was at a building off-site.
Yeah.
That was, I think, technically maybe part of Pembroke.
Yeah.
But
I feel like when you say community college, people are just going to put it into their GPS and go there. And no, we were really given inaccurate information. So, and people said there wasn't really sufficient notice, right? It wasn't really publicized well. I mean, like if you drop a schedule.
That was a huge issue.
Yeah.
If you're not on Twitter or you're not stalking the NCGA website, it should have been in the newspaper.
Yeah, it's just like a PDF that someone uploads on the website. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to know if the hearing is there. I mean, I think that, we try to do our best to publicize, and a lot of other partners as well, but we don't have the, grand...
For public hearings, there really could have been more done to make it actually public and accessible to folks.
And just basic stuff, like there weren't signs outside a lot of these places. The number of times I was, pulling on a locked door, being like, how do I get into this building?
It's not great.
Yeah, not great.
And language was another issue.
We had several people who were Spanish speaking who ended up bringing their own interpreter so that they could participate. That's just a huge burden to put on someone. The state should really be providing that. We have lots of Spanish speakers in the state. We have lots of speakers who don't have English as their first language, and it would not be, it's only right to make it accessible to them to provide interpreters. I think we also had some hearing impaired people who also felt that there should have been ASL interpreters there so that they could participate, so that they could hear from other people. And generally, there was just no effort made to accommodate
any accessibility issues.
Yeah, really no language accessibility, but also, in terms of just being accessible to people with with
any kind of disability issues,
mobility issues or anything like that. There just was not. There was no real concession made to that at all.
No. So there were a lot of issues with sort of accessibility of the hearings.
Well, one thing I would also say too is that we are in the middle of a pandemic still, right? I mean, I think
huge one.
Yeah, and
we heard it a lot in the comments.
Yeah,
people saying,
there was no acknowledgement of that though. There was no virtual option for participation. And a lot of people said that a lot of people couldn't make it because they're immunocompromised. They don't feel safe going to a place like that, and there was just no way for them to participate safely. I know I was at a lot of hearings where the legislators were not wearing masks. It was just in general, people were not. It did not feel like their safety was being paid attention to.
No, I talked to multiple folks who were planning to make comments and ended up submitting them to the online portal who would have liked to be able to go in person but just didn't feel safe or were immunocompromised or had people in their lives who were immunocompromised, and it just didn't feel safe for a lot of folks. So I think that was a big issue as well. So what about, we heard from folks a lot of folks who had sort of broader, overarching concerns about, the redistricting process or things that they wanted to bring up. What were some of the most common concerns or issues that we saw come up in these hearings kind of across the state? Well, and then we'll talk about more geographically.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, and by my last count, about a quarter of the people who went to these hearings asked for there to be another round of hearings, basically asked for there to be hearings after maps were proposed. So we've been told that there will only be one hearing after maps are proposed, and that it will be in Raleigh, and if, the past is any record, then it will be probably at 8:30 in the morning, in the legislative office building
Probably
or
find
something.
out about it the day before.
Yeah, we'll have less than 24 hours notice or something like that. I mean, that's how they've done things. And that's just not accessible for people. It's not fair, and it really feels like they're intentionally trying to create a situation where people are not actually able to have good input on maps. Because like you said, we're going to talk about some of the geographically specific things people said. But, frankly, like, that's a difficult thing to do. We do those trainings for a reason. It's not intuitive necessarily. It's not something that's easy for people. And if they had maps to respond to, I think that we would have gotten a lot more, information that could be useful in making maps better.
Yep.
To better serve people.
Absolutely. Lots of folks, just said that they wanted the opportunity to comment once they see the map. They were very specific about that.
Yeah.
A lot of folks even mentioned the specific counties that they wanted added. I heard a lot of comments to the effect of, you should have another round of hearings in every county that you've had these hearings in, plus an additional one per congressional district, at least.
Yeah.
So lots of folks asking for that, for sure. The number, I would say 20%. I think we looked at the numbers and it was about 20% of comments asked for that
I think that's
specifically.
Right. Yeah.
And then also just, the other big kind of broad theme was just transparency in general. That was probably the number one word I heard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and things that kind of come under that for me that I was sort of hearing were, I think a lot of the things that, problem with accessibility, so a lot of times we would hear from the chairs, well, if people can't make it, they can just comment online, but none of those online comments are visible. A lot of people brought up that they would like to see other people's public comments, that the comments that are submitted online should be made available to everyone.
Yep.
So I think that that's one thing, improving the website. I mean, like the schedule drops and it's like on this random committee page on the legislative website. It's not easy to find that committee page, I'll just say. Like, I think every time I do, I have to click through 4 or 5 pages just to get to the committee page usually. And so, we saw a lot of the chairs kind of making a big deal about like, oh, well, everything's on the website, it's so accessible, and that is just not the case.
And we heard a lot of folks were very, suspicious of whether the maps had already been drawn, or wanted, to know how the public was going to be able to actually view, like, would the public be allowed in the rooms when the maps were being drawn? How would things like that look? And we just don't know at this point.
Well, and also the hearings were not live streamed, and live streaming is not something that they don't know how to do. They were recording them, so there are recordings on the legislative YouTube of the hearings, but they didn't live stream it at the time, so no one could watch it live. So not only could they not even participate virtually, they just couldn't watch it in real time.
Yeah.
To me, there's no reason for that.
There's no, even Texas had virtual options. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what are your worst in Texas is Lynn? That's really bad.
What were some of the other? Well, what were some? So definitely transparency. Definitely, folks asking over and over again for more hearings after they can actually look at what they're talking about. But what were some of the other kind of?
I think one thing that came up a lot was one really simple thing that people were asking for is for them not to split different sort of political subdivisions. So people talked a lot about not getting their community split, and they would, often describe what communities they were talking about. But also other things like cities, counties, universities and colleges, precincts also came up a lot. People don't want them to split precincts. I think especially when we heard from local election board officials or people who've worked as election officials were saying how confusing it is when you have
over and over.
Yeah, when you have tons of different districts cutting up one precinct, how confusing it is for election workers or even for the people who are going to vote.
To get the wrong, make sure that folks get the right ballot. The splitting precincts.
Yeah, well, and people who, their neighbors in a completely different district and they can't understand why their ballot looks different.
Yeah, heard from several specific people specifically talking about how their precinct being split had made it hard to do voter engagement, to run elections.
So we heard a lot about sort of not splitting cities, counties, communities, colleges, universities, precincts. That was a big theme. I think also North Carolina's history of racial gerrymandering definitely came into play. A lot of people got up and talked about the ways that especially black communities, but also other communities of color had been cracked and packed in the past to reduce their influence. And, had asked that not be done again. A lot of people also mentioned the Voting Rights Act specifically, complying with the Voting Rights Act, making sure communities of color have, the ability to elect representatives of their choice. And something that also was mentioned a decent number of times that I think is really important, we've heard a lot from the committee about the fact that they're not using racial data to draw these districts. But a lot of people, especially a lot of people from those communities of color, were saying, well, how can you make sure that my community is fairly represented when you're not going to even look at racial data? You have to know where those communities are to make sure that they're fairly represented. So I think there was a lot, that came up about that.
A lot of concern about that specifically, and specifically asking, the committee to make sure that they were not packing or cracking black voters.
Yeah.
So now, we've been talking in our trainings a lot, advocating for people who give input to try to be as geographically specific as possible, understanding that that's the kind of information that folks can actually really implement when they draw the map. So what were some of and we saw a lot of it, and I think as the hearings went on, we saw it emerge even more that folks were really, understanding that and providing that kind of information. So what were some of the things that we heard, that geographically specific asks that people were?
So just to say what an overall theme was, I think, is that people want like communities to be kept together. So I think the thing that we saw come up the most in terms of being geographically specific was about the congressional districts 8 and 9. So congressional districts 8 and 9 are these districts that stretch from basically the Charlotte suburbs out to the Sand Hills area. And so we had this all along the way. It was really interesting. We had people when we were in Mecklenburg at the hearing there. We had people from Southeast Charlotte, from Southeast Mecklenburg County,
Southwest, right?
Southeast.
Okay.
Yeah, east is west.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
But also, people who live in, say, like Union County, those areas that are sort of close to Charlotte. We had them all come and say, we're being paired with these people who live in Robeson County in this really rural area that has a really different cultural background, really different industries, just very different from us. And we feel like our concerns are more similar to other people in the Charlotte suburbs and in the city of Charlotte itself. And we would prefer to be in a district that's like that, that's with Charlotte rather than being paired with these rural areas. And so we heard a lot of that in Mecklenburg.
And then it was so interesting to hear that there, and then to get to the hearing in Pembroke, and then later the hearing in Cumberland, and hear the same thing from the other side of the district. Talking about the issues that people who live in the Sand Hills face around economics and Fort Bragg as an economic driver of the area, the storms that are affecting that area.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because, just thinking about myself personally, having grown up in Moore County, my mom worked at the VA, and that's really typical there. Fort Bragg is sort of this center of gravity where a lot of people commute in there, or their business relies on people who are at Fort Bragg. It really does make sense as sort of a place that would root a district that's for that area.
Yep.
And that's what we heard. I think we said it was like half of people at the Fort Fayetteville hearing.
At both the Cumberland and Robeson hearings, half the people who spoke mentioned or advocated directly for Sand Hills Congressional District and named the counties that it should include, Hope, Scotland, Cumberland, some people included Moore, Robeson, and so it was very stark how that is a theme that is emerging across the state and was very common. So that was certainly, I think, one of the most notable things that we noticed. What were some of the other? Were there any other kind of geographically specific things?
So we definitely heard about the Sand Hills District the most, but we heard a lot of other things that I think would be along similar lines. So I think it must have been when we were in Pitt County. There were people who live in the 1st Congressional District, so that's a congressional district that covers sort of the Northeast. And they were talking about how previous versions of the district had kept parts of Durham in that district, and that's a really, really different area, right? Or Durham's a very urban area. The rest of this district is really rural, and they were saying that they wanted to keep sort of the redrawn district that was redrawn in 2019. They wanted to keep it to be those northeastern areas. I think some people out west talked about previous versions of the congressional maps that had, again, like I said before, like split Buncombe in half and paired it with like Lincoln County and Gaston County and just stuff that didn't make sense at all. And people were talking about how now that Buncombe is with the rest of the western counties, that makes more sense to them. Another thing I think we heard out there was people were asking for Watauga County to be included in District 11 because App State is there in Boone, and UNCA is in Nashville, and they both have tourism as sort of their central industry, and so that was interesting to hear. I think the other thing that we heard a lot too is that people, especially in the northern part of Mecklenburg, so people who are living in like Davidson, Huntersville, Cornelius, that area, we're talking a lot about, I think especially in reference to state legislative maps, about wanting to be paired with Charlotte, paired with the rest of Mecklenburg instead of with some other rural area, maybe north of them, because they really, again, it was one of those situations where they were saying, we live here in northern Mecklenburg, but like all of the healthcare we go, or all the events that we go to, places we shop are all in Charlotte, and we want to be paired with Charlotte. So I think that those were, so basically what we were hearing a lot from people was sort of trying to keep areas that are similar together, urban areas with urban areas, areas that are tourist areas.
In the triad too.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We heard a lot of folks from High Point area talking about keeping High Point whole, or keeping High Point, together with Greensboro and Winston-Salem, and folks in that general area, naming that as a sort of a community of interest, or an area that should be kept together. Definitely heard that a lot in both the Forsyth and Alamance hearings that came up. And a lot of folks also talking about, we said before, college campuses. We heard it in Wilmington, we heard it out in Jackson, we heard it in Alamance and Forsyth.
I think that really the activism that the students at NCA&T did when their campus was split by congressional districts really made a huge difference in kind of making that a salient issue, because I think like you said, I definitely heard a lot of people bring up keeping college and university campuses whole as one of their issues.
Almost every hearing actually. I think it came up.
Well, North Carolina has so many educational institutions, so there's really nowhere you can go where there isn't like an important university or college.
It was nice to hear, to have, see college students, so current college students showing up in these hearings and advocating for that. That was cool. Okay, great. Well, so that's, I think, kind of what we've seen over the past month, our little recap. And what are we looking at now? What comes next? You mentioned, we're going to be, what's happening this week?
So this week, tomorrow actually, so this Tuesday is going to be the first meetings of the House and Senate redistricting committees after these hearings, so that's happening tomorrow. I assume that probably what we're going to see there is some kind of addressing the issue of county groupings. So county groupings are these, this way that we divide up the state before we draw state legislative districts. It's like kind of complex, but basically it's the thing we have to do before we can draw state legislative districts. And so I assume that is something that will be brought up tomorrow, and I think that also is a signal that there will be some actual map drawing very, very soon, probably this week. And so we're really heading into a period where we're going to actually see maps being drawn in public to some effect. We haven't heard whether or not the map drawing will be live streamed. We haven't heard
how it's going to work exactly.
How it's going to work.
Maybe we'll find out tomorrow. Maybe
just there are a lot of practical questions, because I don't know where the turtles are going to fit in the rooms and stuff like that. But we will see what's actually going to happen with the actual map drawing, how they will do that. In the past there have been a lot of issues with when 2019, when we saw sort of map drawing being done in public for the first time, there were a lot of issues with that, even though it was a lot more transparent than before, but that's a very low bar. But we didn't have any audio from the people who were drawing the maps, so we couldn't really understand why decisions were being made when they were. We'd have 3 or more computer terminals going on at the same time. We'd have Senate and House drawing at the same time. It's very hard.
Different rooms.
In different rooms,
Different floors of the
building. The number of times that I was riding the elevator up and down, it's really, really hard to keep track of. And so, we were hoping for some transparency improvements on that end. I'm not sure what we're going to see this week.
Well, we will see, and we'll be sharing it on our social media. And again, Leica will be tweeting. I'll be there some. We'll be making sure that we are sort of documenting the process that we're seeing happening as it unfolds, and you can follow along. It's important that folks are paying attention to the process, and And also we will be rolling out this week some advocacy tools if you want to send emails to request more hearings after the maps are drawn. If you want to add your voice to that, even if you made a comment to that effect, you know, I think it's going to be important for folks to keep up kind of the pressure on that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I feel like that's really, really important. People really deserve the chance to get to react to maps that they actually see, to see how their communities are actually being treated, and to be able to say something about that. You know, and I really do believe that, you know, one way we do sometimes get these things is by putting sort of relentless pressure on the legislature. We kind of can get some of these concessions out of them. So we may, you know, we really, really hope that, you know, if you're able to, that you can participate in that. You can contact them about that.
We can't rely on them to do the right thing on their own, but we can put pressure, especially on the things that, you know, just make a lot of sense and that people are asking for, and just make sure that we're not like letting up on that. Really critical transparency.
Yeah, someone was asking me the other day, I think it was at that Duke conference, about like how change happens, and you know, a lot of people were saying a lot of things, and I was like, listen, they're self-interested and they don't like being annoyed. That's one thing I can say. If you annoy them enough, then sometimes we get stuff
for being as annoying as possible.
Yeah,
and we're going to help you be annoying.
We will help you. I mean, I'm very annoying all the time.
We're models of annoying. And we are going to be, so we'll have a tool that will help you if you want to email all the members of the legislative redistricting committee all at once. We will be sharing that out on our newsletter and on our social media. So you can follow us along if you're interested in that, as well as some you know, tools to help with letters to the editor. If you're a person who has written a letter to the editor in the past or is interested in doing that, that's another great way to kind of make sure that people in your community are also aware of this and able to you know, advocate to their legislators that we want meeting. We want hearings after these draft maps. The communities need that. So those are the two kind of advocacy pieces that we're focusing on right now. We'll be rolling out this week. And then, of course, we'll be doing some, we'll be tweeting and posting on social media as things are happening and unfolding at the legislature. And we expect to also be doing some Facebook Lives.
Yeah, we'll try to do
assuming we get Facebook back.
Some recaps sort of like this, probably a little bit shorter, but so that you can keep up with us and what's going on, what's been happening on the legislature. Like,
again, if you don't want to watch the entire map drawing process, you just want like the 5-minute recap from Rain Lego, we'll do that.
We'll do that because we're going to be there all day.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Follow along. Okay, well, I think that we appreciate folks, you know, everybody. Also, we just want to say a big thank you to everybody who showed up at those hearings that we've had over the last month. You know, it was not easy. We definitely heard from a lot of folks who drove, you know, an hour, sometimes more than an hour, you know, who had hardship just getting there, and of course showing up and reading a statement or saying a statement in front of a big group like that's not always not always the easiest, but it was really inspiring.
I was impressed by how many people turned out. I think it was around 450 people turned out, you know, when we were in a situation where, again, like these places were not accessible, there wasn't good notice, these things were in the middle of the afternoon, they really made it difficult, but people really showed up.
Yep, and you know, we're grateful that folks did that, and you know, kudos to all of you who spoke or submitted comments online, and please keep following along with this process and keep helping us and holding those legislators accountable.
Yeah. So we'll put a link in the description, I guess, so where you can sign up for our newsletter and get emails from us so that you know when stuff is going on, when you have moments to sort of.
And if you think you already should be on the newsletter, you might want to check your spam, because sometimes newsletter type things go to spam. So look in your email, do a search in your email if you think you should be getting the newsletter and aren't already, and sign up to get it and follow along.
Yeah, Rita is a great newsletter. All right, thanks everyone.